Greetings, humans, I'm Retrobot, and you are not. Ha ha hee hee ho ho. Here I go.
Oh!
Ouch. Pull me out.
Oh boy, Retrobot, it's closing time. Lights out. I'll pull you out tomorrow.
Hey, wait.
Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electrotech. And back on the retro bench here is the Sony HP485 stereo music system, of which I evaluated, along with a second unit owned by the same customer, a Panasonic SE2600. Now, in the initial evaluation video, I function tested both units, and I'll start with that Panasonic. You may recall, if you watched that video, and if you're interested in watching it, it's a few videos back from this one. The main control lever was seized up. I produced a separate video on it going into the diagnostics and the repair. So if you're interested in that, check that out too. That involved that BSR, I believe it was a C141R turntable. But anyways, check that out if interested. I go into the whole procedure of kind of tracing out that problem and resolving it. Now this one here functions mechanically as far as the startup, as you can see, but the auto mechanism is not engaging. When I lift the Tonearm and carry it across the platter, I meet up with some resistance here. Okay, so the end of play, the trip mechanism and all that is not functioning properly. So I'm going to get into this unit and obviously go through the mechanics and figure out what's going on with that. There's also a channel out. I can't remember now if it's the right or the left, but I'm going to go into that as well. You know, verify whether or not the cartridge is good or bad. And or whether or not there's a connection issue, continuity issue between the cartridge and the preamp section of this unit. So I'm going to get into that, get this thing disassembled. I'm not going to disassemble it on camera because the camera, you know, I'm working around it, but I will at least come back and kind of let you guys know how I disassembled it just briefly, so that if you're dealing with one of these in the future and you find this video, that might help you along. So let's go ahead and get into that and find out why there's a channel issue with this and why the auto mechanism is not engaging. It's probably going to involve degraded lubricants as far as the mechanical issue is concerned, but let's go ahead and see what's going on and whether or not there might be some damage to something bent or whatever, which I doubt. I think it's just going to be bound up from degraded lubricant and so forth. So let me go ahead and get into that, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so in short, how I got this turntable out of the cabinet of the Sony HP485 that I just pointed out was these. Actually, let me just kind of show you what they look like. There's 4 of these screws here, here, and here, and that just causes this whole platform here, okay, to just lift right out of the unit. So I didn't have to end up loosening the transit screws to pull the chassis out. The whole platform just lifted out. And as far as the platter is concerned, let me just show you that real quick. Okay, so to remove the platter, there's just this the centerpiece here with these tabs that slide beneath this rubber platter mat, okay? And so these tabs here just kind of slide under the rubber platter mat. So you have to just be careful when you're when you're trying to pull out the centerpiece, because it's just very thin, like aluminum, okay? And so it could bend fairly easy if you were just to try to rip it up. So I just used a small like a jeweler's screwdriver, and it just kind of brought the piece of rubber. It's just essentially a rubber lip that these tabs slide under, okay? So by just getting a small screwdriver and lifting the rubber lip and kind of popping the tabs out one by one. That removes the centerpiece here, which in turn reveals this clip that that attaches to the you know, the spindle housing or hub, whatever, in there. So once you pop this out, then the platter just simply lifts out, and that's about it. Okay, so before I start getting into diagnosing the mechanical issues that I pointed out a moment ago, and before I start talking about, you know, these mechanisms on the top side, the mechanisms on the bottom side, let's turn our attention to the main unit, because I'm going to start there and explain a few things as well. So let's go ahead and do that. Let me change the camera view. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the bottom of the unit, or the bottom of the chassis, and as opposed to just a standalone cover. Okay, so there's circuit boards and various assemblies, tuning condenser and so forth, and a transformer that is mounted to this chassis panel here, okay, as opposed to just a cover. So what I did was remove the various screws along the outer perimeter, if you will, that allow me to achieve some separation here. Okay, let me kind of pan on it. You can see it's kind of separating from the cabinet a bit. And then there's this panel here around the back that I already separated. There was these 4 screws in total here and up here, okay, that allow me to remove this panel. And I didn't really have to do all that, but as I go through and perform an inspection as part of my process, and just a quick inspection, I want to have a little bit better access to things. But ultimately, just to remove the turntable, as I demonstrated, I only had to remove those 4 screws to lift out that panel. And I didn't even have to do that. I could have just used the transit screws and just pulled the chassis out, as I mentioned, just the turntable chassis itself. But anyways, not a big deal one way or the other. So, okay, I removed the screws around the outer edge here, or perimeter. And also too, you notice, okay, you see the bottom lip of the chassis panel, this bottom chassis panel. You can see that the bottom of the control panel or face here, it secures to that. And when you remove these 4 screws that run along its length, you can see that that allows some separation there, okay? And then if you scroll around to the top side, and let me put a little more light on this, okay? You can see we have this this frame here, this frame rail, okay? And there's a couple screws, one at the bottom, one at the top, that further secure the top of this face panel to it, and that's what stabilizes the you know, the face panel, control panel, whatever. Okay, and anyways, once you do that, then as you can see, and I'm going to reach around carefully, that provides access to the pots. Okay, and I'm going to kind of zoom into that. Okay, so pots, and you can see the selector switch up here, and I mentioned I was going to perform some light maintenance to the various switches and pots. Okay, so I wanted to gain access to those. Now let me go ahead and back off. And one thing that if some of you guys are going to end up working on these, just be really careful, because let me go ahead and zoom in on this here. Okay, and of course I'm going to have to swap out the battery because it's flashing again. And yeah, anyways, I'm going to point out this interesting aspect of the dial face. Okay, so as I was mentioning before I had to swap out the battery again, is that this thin sheet of film, you can hear how thin that is. That is what the dial face are printed onto. Okay, and when you turn the dial shaft, this film rotates onto this spool here, and you know, the tuning condenser over here, of course, and this network of spools that the film is attached to, they're all obviously interconnected by the dial string and what have you. So everything is all synced up nice and what have you. But it's kind of a bit more of a complex system, if you will. Also too, and let me very carefully open this panel up again. Yeah, you can see there's several spools and so forth, because the film passes in front of this window here. And again, rather than a dial pointer or needle that travels back and forth, you just have a fixed indicator here that's printed onto the window itself. Okay, so there you have it. So it's kind of a fancy schmancy setup. And again, if something happens to this film, then that's it. So you have to be careful when you're in here, moving things around, manipulating the face panel here. When you get it all, let me get that secured again, because everything's just kind of teetering there. So you have to be careful when you're in there manipulating stuff around and whatnot, that you don't lacerate the film and all that. So that's that. And then over here, let me zoom into the rear panel, okay? And that's about as far as I can zoom in. You have your antenna inputs here, and you'll notice, I think, let me get a little more light on the subject there. I don't know how much it's going to help. But there is I don't know if you could see them via the camera view, but there's these very, very, very thin leads that I'm moving around here with the superhero pointer, okay? And these are the very thin leads that, of course, attach to the AM antenna here, this bar. So when you're moving around the, when you're kind of manipulating this rear panel, you need to be careful that you don't, cut those as well, sever those. So just a few things to be aware of in this unit. And that's about it. So I'm going to start troubleshooting that channel issue, and I'm going to start with just putting a signal into both of these RCA jacks. Now these RCA jacks here are what connect to the turntable and of course carry the signal from the turntable, the cartridge, to the preamp section of this unit. So I'm going to inject a very low level phono signal into these RCA jacks and just see if I have a signal on each channel. You can see I have these test speakers over here just set up, and I'm going to start there because I want to rule out that there's any issue with the phono preamp, and then after that we'll go ahead and trace things from there if need be. Since I already have this open and I'm going to be performing some other tasks, as I mentioned, I'm going to go in here and just kind of clean things up, get the dust out, do a little inspection. I have access to the pots, which is why I wanted to kind of get in here. Okay, you can see I have access to the to the pots and switches, selector switch, and I'm just going to go through and just kind of freshen things up, just do some light maintenance as I mentioned before. Let me get this back in place since everything's just dangling about. Okay, so there you have it. So I'm going to get to that, get some things cleaned up in here, kind of look around, make sure everything's okay otherwise, and I'll be back in just a moment once I get a signal into these RCA jacks and see if we have a sound bilaterally on both sides of these, in these speakers here. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is inject that low-level signal so that we can confirm that the phono stage is working as it should, that both channels are working. And let me go ahead and zoom down to the meter here. I have a 5 millivolt signal. In this case, it's just going to be a 400 hertz tone that I am going to again connect to these RCA cables that come from the turntable, as I mentioned. So let me go ahead and do that, and let's see what we got. Okay, so I have a 400 hertz burst tone on the left channel there, and that's working just fine. All right, and I just chose a burst tone as opposed to a steady tone because it's easier to tolerate it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next channel. Okay, here's our right channel. Okay, so as you can hear, our phono preamp stage is working like it should, so that's not the issue there. So what I'm going to do is test the cartridge, and I just decided to do this first because as you saw earlier and right now, I still have this open, and I'm going to be performing some maintenance, as I mentioned already, with the pots and getting this thing cleaned out. So while I had it open, I just figured I would inject the signal in there and conduct the tests that we just conducted. So everything is looking good there. So let me go ahead and get to the cartridge, and we'll ohm that out and see how it's looking. Okay, so here's our cartridge here. And I don't know if the text on the cartridge is in focus. I can't tell by looking at the back of the camera, but that's not important. It's a Pickering cartridge. It's a V15 HB, as in Hotel Bravo, or AT2. That's Alpha Tango 2, C as in Charlie. Okay, so let me go ahead and ohm this out. I'm going to just flip it around here, and again, I don't know what is in focus here. It looks like it's kind of in focus, but you know, this screen on the back of this camera is kind of small, so it's hard for my elderly eyes to really see that. So I'm going to clip onto this right channel ground pin here. Okay, now we're just going to ohm this out and see if both channels are reading closely or close enough. And then here's our right signal pin. Okay, I'm just going to set this down for but a moment, and let's go ahead and pan on over to the meter. And you can see 535, 0.5, 0.6, whatever ohms. Okay, so not bad, not bad. And let me go ahead and swap over to our left channel ground pin here. And here's our left channel signal pin. Okay. And we are reading 543.1 ohms, 0.2, whatever. So that's close enough. It should be functioning just fine. And so anyways, it looks like our cartridge is doing okay. So let me go on to checking out the wiring of the Tonearm, and I will be right back. Okay guys, so in the interest of time and so I don't bore you to tears, I went ahead and disassembled the head shell, and it was fairly easy to do. It's just a couple screws there, and you know, it came out, so not a big deal. But I will probably film the reassembly of everything to give you guys an idea how it at least goes back together, and then if you ever wanted to disassemble one of these, you can just reverse that and you'll be in business. So again, it's not a complicated thing, but what I found was, sure enough, there was a wire that broke off the the socket here, the cartridge socket, and one of the, pulled off one of the terminals here, and sort of retracted its way down into the Tonearm a bit. So they didn't really leave much slack, at least not enough slack to work with. And anyways, that being said, I'm going to end up just running new 32 gauge Tonearm wire. I have it here in stock, so not a problem. I will do that, but what I'm going to do though, since I have the Tonearm detached and everything, once I get the wiring desoldered from the bottom of the table, I'm going to go ahead and set the Tonearm off to the side, because obviously I still need to assess the mechanical issue with this turntable. So while I'm doing that, it'll be nice not to have this Tonearm here, and I'd have to secure it and all that so it doesn't dangle all around. So I'll just set it off to the side, and once I get the mechanical issue resolved, then obviously I will continue on with running the new wire down the Tonearm and getting everything soldered in place, and obviously the head shell and everything reassembled on here, which I will, like I said, I will film that for you guys. And other than that, and by the way too, I'm going to end up replacing the stylus here. It's one of these DAT2 styluses, so I'm going to end up replacing this. It's old anyways, and so get a fresh stylus on board, and that's about it. So what I'm going to do next, like I said, is I'm going to start the process of getting this turntable flipped over, start going through the mechanisms, and that, of course, I'm going to film. I'm going to go through the troubleshooting process there. So once I do that, I will be back and we'll go into that, okay? Okay, so here we are at the bottom of the turntable. I'm just about getting ready to start troubleshooting the mechanism and finding out why we don't have auto function. You recall that this unit does start up, the platter rotates, but when I flick it over to auto, we don't have any auto function. The Tonearm's not lifting or anything. So that's what I'm getting ready to evaluate. However, one thing that I wanted to divert to is, at the same time, I'm getting ready to pull some new wiring through the Tonearm here. And I just want to point out my setup. Now, feel free to do whatever you feel is easiest for you. But since I have the whole platform here that the turntable chassis is mounted to, because of the way that this Sony HP485 combo unit is arranged, I was able to just unscrew this platform here and just pull this out. So I'm using the platform just kind of to secure the Tonearm to while I work on it. And but you could do the same thing just on on another part of your bench or whatever the case. But what I'm doing here is I'm just clamping the Tonearm to the platform here so that it doesn't shift around. And of course I have some cloth on the underside of this platform so that it doesn't get marred up, scratched up or anything, because that's a part of the platform that's visible. So I don't want to put any scratches on it. So I have a rag under there, and I just have these clamps situated, as you can see, just to secure my Tonearm. And over here you can see I just have some of those little helping hands here that are holding my this is the new 32 gauge Tonearm wire here. And here's a couple strands here. Let me just actually zoom in a little bit. Okay, and hopefully that's somewhat focused. And then here's a couple of strands of the existing wire. I just very carefully soldered the existing wires here to the strands of this new wire, and everything is nice and smooth. Of course, you don't want anything getting snagged up. You don't want a big solder ball here or something like that. So we just want to gently just guide it on through, and hopefully we don't hit any snags of any kind, and it'll just pass through the tone arm nice and smooth. So that's how I like to do it. I just like to, work in a manner that, again, is organized, and this is a good way to get the wiring down the tone arm, and you don't have the tone arm shifting around. You're not hassling with it. You have your helping hands over here, and yeah, everything is nice and organized when you're trying to solder these together. You're not fumbling around, and a little bit of preparation beforehand makes life a little bit easier. So again, that's my way of doing this. As I often say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Okay, so everything went fine. I was able to get the new tone arm wire through, as you can see, from end to end. But everything went okay otherwise. The only thing that I'm going to point out now is, and again, this is not something you absolutely have to do. Hopefully everything is focused in okay. I like to make sure that my wire color corresponds with the color code of the cartridge pins. So for our right channel, we have a green ground pin here. And then we have a red signal pin, and this is for our right channel. And as you can see, I have a green and a red conductor that correspond to that. And then we have for the left channel, we have a blue ground pin, and we have a white signal pin. So you can see that I have a blue and a white wire that correspond to that. And then I have this black wire that you might notice here is just to bond or ground the tone arm to the chassis of the turntable. That's all that is. So that's about it. I just wanted to mention that. You don't have to do it that way, but for consistency's sake, it's nice to have your wire color correspond to the color coding of the cartridge if possible. Okay, so here we are one last time at the tone arm, and you can see I have the head shell in place. I'm ready to install it back on the tone arm, and I'm still going to set aside the tone arm and get to the mechanisms, but I just want to get this wrapped up here so that all I have to do is again just solder up the wires under the chassis. So anyways, this ground wire or bonding wire is going to attach to I'll try to stay in frame here. It's going to screw in to this little terminal connector is going to be screwed to this hole here. However, the head shell is going to be sitting on top of this connector here, because obviously it has to make contact with the metal of the tone arm. So that's just going to sit there first. So it's going to be hard for me to do this on camera because the camera's right in the way, but you can see that I have the tone arm wires threaded through the opening here at the end of the head shell. Okay, and again, this is the only wire here, this bonding wire or ground wire, that doesn't get passed through the head shell. Okay, because again, the head shell has to sit on top of it. So what I'm going to do is just that. I'm going to just set it kind of in place, and then just drop a screw down in here. Okay, so I'm going to start by doing that real quick. Okay, so here we are. I pulled the black wire all the way down the tone arm, and the ring terminal that it's attached to, of course, is underneath this portion of the head shell in contact with the metal of the tone arm, okay, which is the whole purpose of it. And otherwise, as you can see here, I have the cartridge socket or receptacle all finished up. The only other thing I'm going to be doing to it is just using my little, let me get in frame here, my little brush and some contact cleaner, and just cleaning out these sockets a little bit, just a little bit of a, just kind of twist the brush around in there and make sure everything is nice and clean so that the cartridge pins make good contact with the sockets there. So other than that, oh, also too, you can see probably down in here the hole to which the wires pass through. Once I get everything situated and I know more or less where the, where everything's going to settle in terms of the wires, the wires position where it's going to settle in relation to the hole there, I'm going to put just one very, very small and neat wrap of electrical tape onto these wires before I give it the final pull through, so that it provides a little bit of abrasion resistance around the wires. Now, when I had everything taken apart, I did pass my finger over the hole a bit and kind of feel to make sure there wasn't any burrs and nothing felt sharp. They did a pretty good job at deburring those holes there in anticipation, obviously, of passing Tonearm wire down the Tonearm. And same thing with the bottom there. I have a couple of pieces of heat shrink tubing at the end of the wires there that I'm going to slide up, slot into the hole and just hit it with some heat real quick, and just again, just get a little bit of insulation down into that hole there, again, for a little extra abrasion resistance. So that's about it. Just want to cover all bases and make sure there's not going to be an issue, even though those holes on each end seem to be pretty smooth and deburred. So other than that, let me just finish up and by just zooming in and saying that I wanted to make sure that some of you understood how this head shell goes back on. Again, there's just a screw here and this screw here that again secures that ring terminal underneath and secures the back end of the head shell here as well. And then all that happens here is that this cartridge receptacle here, just you probably can't really see on camera. Let me see if I could zoom in without it getting horribly, yeah, I think it's starting to blur right about there. Let me see. Okay. But there's some slots on each side of this head shell that this receptacle just drops down in, okay? So it just kind of drops down and snaps back into place. So again, when I pull the excess slack out of the wires and all that stuff, that's what's going to happen. It's just going to drop down in there, and then I can plug my cartridge back in, and that's about it. So that's how that all goes back together. So for some of you that are working on these, you'll know in advance, if you find this video, what's going on. And this is the same across the board for a lot of these types of turntables. They're all basically the same. So again, no rocket science there. So let me go ahead and get back to the mechanism. I've been saying that, but I wanted to cover this Tonearm really good and just kind of get it out of the way, because that actually was the hardest part of this whole thing. Was, you're dealing with all these tiny wires and soldering them in and pulling them through and all that. And even though it's not a big technical affair, it's just a little bit more time consuming. I think this mechanism is going to go pretty fast. Hopefully that's not famous last words and there's going to be something really wrong, but I don't think so. I think it's just the usual mechanisms just being gummed up and all that. So anyways, I will be right back with that. Okay, so let's get to troubleshooting the mechanism here. In review, we do not have auto start, and we don't have the end of play trip mechanism that returns the Tonearm to its resting position. I demonstrated that previously when I carried the Tonearm across the platter, and I met up with resistance as though something was binding up, and so there we have it. Now I'm going to go over the anatomy a little bit of these levers and their functions as I work my way through. Keep in mind that different manufacturers will refer to these levers using different terminology. It's all essentially the same, and you know, it's pretty you know, interchangeable across the board, but there will be some differences. But as long as we understand, that you folks understand the main functions that these carry out. For example, here's our main operating lever here, okay? And we can see that, you know, it's not bound up, and we know that because when I moved it over to the start position, we saw the platter start up and turn and all that. And that tells us too that we have function of this switch lever here. You see the switch lever moving around, and you can see it pushing in the switch there. Okay, so we know that that's all good. And also too, let's see here, we also have the our speed lever here, and the you know, interlink here and so forth, and the rod, all functioning. Okay, so we know that's at least not all bound up. So the first thing I need to do though is remove this operating plate or cam, whatever, and you know, they refer to it as a cam, but you know, operating plate, same difference. And I do have movement of the actuator slide. You can probably see right here this silver colored actuating slide, okay, which again engages the actuator pawl and all that, and I explained that before. And there is movement there. I don't know if it's, you know, I don't know if it's meeting up with a seized up pawl or cam or whatever. I don't know yet. I don't think so. Although I can probably bet that, you know, we're going to be dealing at some point with degraded lubricants, and to the point of probably causing some binding up, which is why our auto start and end of play mechanisms are not working. So, but at least we know we have our main operating lever and the rejection lever here. You see that the rejection lever is free, and the rejection lever is meeting up with the tab, which you can't see. It's underneath this operating plate, but this tab here that brings the actuator slide forward. If you watch that actuator slide, okay, the reject lever here did engage the tab underneath. So we have all these basic functions working pretty good, and you know, again, switch lever and all that, it's engaging the switch. We are powering up the platter and so forth, and we know the motor works obviously because of that. And so let me go ahead and get this operating plate or cam off, and this feed link and all that, and start going through and just checking as to what's engaging, what's not. If I have to flip it around to the top side, which I will eventually do, but if I have to do that because our problem is that main cam gear there that might be stuck or whatever, not engaging properly, then I will do that. But let me go ahead and remove this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm about to remove the plate here, and I have this feed lever, or what they refer to here as a release lever, that I'm just going to pull out of the way here. Let me remove it from its position here, and I'm just going to set it off to the side for now, and leave the pawl spring attached and all that. No big deal there. So what I did was just remove this E-clip or circlip, whatever, and this loop spring, what it does, it just bends, and then let me get something to point with, and then this end here just clips into this slot, okay? That's all it does. I don't know if you can see that, but there's one end here. Let me just pull it out. Okay. There's this end here that drops through the slot down here, and there's a lever underneath, and I'll kind of get into that more in just a moment when I remove the plate. But this essentially drops into the slot and engages with the lever beneath, and then this other end here, okay, is what you fold over and drop into place here, okay? So it essentially is positioned there, and then, you know, of course this clip goes on first, this E clip. So let me go ahead and see if I can get this back out. Probably a pair of needle nose pliers will be a little bit more in order. Let me reach over the camera here and try to get this back out. Here we go. All right. So let me just set the spring aside here. And then there's another circlip or E-clip that goes onto this post here. There's another lever referred to as a friction link or friction lever that this let me see if I reach underneath. Okay, this E-clip just pops onto there, and anyways, oh, and then this return spring here is for the for this feed lever or release lever, and it just kind of slots into there and bends around and all that. I'll demonstrate that when I put this back together. So let me go ahead here and let me just get everything situated and get this plate removed. Okay, let's see if I can. It's kind of a little booger. All right, set this here, and here we go. Again, here's our actuator lever that engages the pawl and so forth. Okay, so what I've determined by going through these various levers and actuators, including the selector actuator lever here, we have this selector lever, we have the friction link, and this whole assembly here, this lower casting with the various levers, which ultimately is responsible, at least for the most part, in the picking up and setting down of the tone arm. Okay, and you know, all of these mechanisms, of course, are all interdependent on each other, and you know, linked in some way, shape, or form to carry out the total function of this turntable, obviously. But I focused in on here, and I've just kind of been through the like I said, these various actuating levers and so forth, and they all seem to be pretty free. Okay, nothing's really bound up here. Everything's moving pretty darn good here, and I demonstrated the other levers earlier on as far as the you know, speed selector, speed select lever here, and the interconnect and the rod and the main operating lever, and everything is moving pretty free. The only lever that's a little bit stiff here and not seized up, just it could use a little bit of you know, re-greasing, cleaned up, is just this selector lever here. And but otherwise everything seems to be pretty good. I think I'm going to find that most of the problem has to do with that main cam top side, and probably the you know, the associated actuator pawl and some of the various components there that I'm going to be pointing out when we get topside. But anyways, but what I decided to do, though, being that this is a nicer unit overall, just, the Sony HP485. I'm going to go ahead and go through these one by one, and I'm going to clean and re-lubricate most of the mechanism, if not all. Once I start getting into it, I'll probably just go for broke and just do what I need to do with cleanup and re-lubrication. And that way I could just rule out any issues, which I know, like I said, that for the most part, based on my evaluation of all these levers and actuators, nothing's jammed up, nothing appears bent as far as these various tabs and whatnot. Nothing is bent. None of these posts are bent. They're not deformed, malformed, bent, whatever the case. So everything is looking pretty good there. So again, I'm just going to get these cleaned up, re-lubricated, and then I think that the bulk of the problem is going to be on the top side, I'm pretty sure. So let me do that, and I will be back. Okay, so here we are again. All of the main levers and actuators are properly re-lubricated. I used a high quality white lithium grease, and as you might be able to see, and I'll point out just a few of the more crucial areas. Our main operating lever here, all of the levers that are in contact with the chassis, that pivot on the chassis, you can see have a swipe of white lithium grease so that they'll continue for many years to come to move along their range of travel or ranges of travel smoothly. And again, the operating plate or cam was removed, as you saw in the previous section where I kind of showed that and explained what I was going to be doing. Now, I didn't remove that bottom casting, but I did pull off most of the levers and actuators that required it, and there were a few. And again, cleaned everything very well, re-lubricated everything, and just kind of tested the overall function in terms of their ranges of travel, make sure they were pivoting the way that they should be pivoting. So I talked on that a little bit, but so I'll go ahead and move on. So everything has been done. Over here you can see, and let me just kind of, I'll just kind of demonstrate once again. Notice the actuator slide there. It's going to it's going to push toward the main cam or the spindle area, and you can see that everything is operating just fine. Okay, our switch lever there is doing what it should be doing, and I pointed all this out. Everything is working nicely with the main operating lever, and our speed control lever and all of its links and rods are doing what they should be doing. I lubricated the speed mechanisms and all that stuff, so everything is working very smooth. And the only other thing I'm going to do before moving to the top side, which I'm going to do in just a minute here, is service the motor, which I started to do. Let me go ahead and zoom in just on that there. So I cleaned everything up and excuse me, dropped a few drops or so of oil into the bearings here. These are oil retaining bearings. They have essentially a sponge and fiber material, a sponge in that housing there that retains oil. So that's all squared away, and that's about it. Everything looks pretty clean otherwise. I'm going to just do a little bit more cleaning of the motor, and that's about it, but most of it is done. So let me go ahead and reassemble what I need to reassemble here as far as the motor goes, and get on over to the top side, pull that main cam and check everything out over there. As far as I'm concerned, everything is done under here, except once I get the Tonearm back on, I just need to solder the leads, the new wires to the terminal block here and all that. And there's also a muting switch here with some contacts. I'm going to clean up those contacts and all that, but otherwise we're good to go. So see you on the other side. Okay, so here we are on the top side. Here's our main cam. I pulled the clip off, and let's go ahead and lift her out of here. Okay. And anyways, there's really no lubricant to speak of. I'm going to apply a thin film of lithium grease in here, and yep, look at that. Sure enough, let me get it into frame. Sure enough, look at how stiff our actuator pawl is right here. That should be moving free. This bottom one is pretty stiff. I'm working it loose a little bit, so anyways, yeah, let me get all this cleaned up and lubricated. That was obviously our problem. 9 times out of 10, these auto problems do involve this, you know, main cam and that actuator pawl and all that. But you know, sometimes it is other, yeah, there's other stuff going on. Like the last turntable, that BSR, there was some other mechanisms involving that reject lever down on the bottom side that, you know, I showed you that I think it was that plastic washer there that was just practically glued to the base of the chassis, you know, from degraded lubricant. So anyways, most of the time it is something that has to do with the cam and actuator pawl, like I said. So let me get that all cleaned up, and then what I'm going to do too is go ahead and get that Tonearm back on and the wiring soldered up, and you know, again, we'll test it out. I'm sure it's going to work just fine, and we'll see if we have both channels and all that, and that's about it. Okay, so after working on the seized up actuator pawls and getting the you know, the main cam all cleaned up and lubricated, everything's looking good with the mechanisms. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and I feel good about going underneath and doing what I did with all of the cleaning and lubrication of all the actuators and levers and all that. Like I said, it needed it. And so anyways, there's still adjustment that needs to be performed with the you know, pickup and set down to the Tonearm. It's not perfect, but I'm just gonna play this a little bit of this piece of test vinyl, and hopefully I won't get any copyright claims or whatever. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and just kind of end it there. And you know, this video is kind of long, but at least I cover some details of, you know, going through the whole process. I have, you know, sound in both channels and all that. But like I said, you know, as you can see, I have the turntable, the platform, and all that just kind of sitting on some blocks. So everything, of course, needs to be reinstalled, not a big deal, and I have a little cleanup to do of everything, some cosmetic detailing, you know, the usual stuff. But anyways, let's go ahead and check it out here. So things are working now. Got some crackles and pops there. Okay, and I'm going to just skate it across. Let me deactivate the queuing here and just kind of skate it across. So our end of play is working. And like I said, pickup and set down needs to be adjusted a bit. Not a problem. I'm going to do all that. But anyways, guys, thank you for you know, coming along on this video here. It was a bit lengthy, but stay tuned for plenty more. I have a lot of good stuff coming, and like I always say, peace, love, rock and roll, and of course, vintage audio.
This is a poor man's shoe production.